Any presentation of factory processes is difficult and must be greatly simplified. I will describe two outstanding new factory methods which I believe are not only interesting, but will give you information which you cannot obtain from a factory trip. A new method of casting stator frames was developed by the Lynn Foundry. This method uses the so-called booking pattern, and frames are being molded on the foundry's molding unit or conveyor line. Now, the booking pattern makes possible a frame construction having minimum weight and maximum strength, and at the same time ensures a high-quality casting with uniform sections. I will illustrate the principles behind the booking process, but since this frame is much too complicated to give a clear demonstration, let us use this highly simplified design. This demonstration model has all the elements of an ordinary frame. You can see the flanges on the end and the bar through the middle. Now, if this model were cut in half, it would have sections like this. The black represents the metal section, and the white the casting itself. Again, you can see the flange on the end, the thin middle section, the bar, and if necessary for ventilating purposes, a hole through the bar. Now, the usual method of making a mold for this part would be to make a mold for the outside and a core for the inside. The core would be baked and set by hand. In the booking process, we also have a mold for the outside and a core for the inside. But the core is not baked, as it is made as a part of the molding process and set by machine as the mold is made. Let us make a booking mold. Now, in order that you may see what is going on inside of the mold, we will use this half of the frame. Naturally, the mold and the core box will also be in half section. Now, first, we would have a core box. Again, the black represents the metal section and the white the metal of the core box itself. And then we have a second core box. And this is placed alongside of the first. We now put sand into the core box, and here the gray represents the sand. And then sand in the second core box. The two core boxes are then booked together. And it's this operation that gives its name to the booking pattern. After the core boxes have been booked, they are rolled over, and the top box is stripped off. We will leave the core in the core box for a moment and make a mold for the lower half. This represents the lower half of the mold. Here the gray represents the sand as it would be when the pattern has been removed. The black, the metal section of the flask, and the white, the flask itself. This is then closed down over the core onto the core box. And then the core box and the mold are rolled over. You will note during this operation that the sand is supported by either the flask or the core box. And then the other half of the core box is stripped off. We now need the upper half of the mold. And this represents the upper half of the mold. Again, the gray represents the sand as would be when the pattern has been removed. The black, the metal section of the flask, and the white, the flask itself. This is closed down over the core onto the lower half, completing the mold. And here you have a mold as it would be when it's completed by the foundry and ready for pouring. Now, to prove to you that I have a mold for this part, I will put the part into the mold. And there you have the mold with the iron in place as it would be poured by the foundry. Now, in actual production, all of the operations you've seen would be performed simultaneously, so that the process lends itself to quantity as well as quality. Needless to say, we believe the booking process to be an outstanding development in the art of making castings.